Good morning. Good morning. Everybody find your seats because we're getting ready to get started. This is a truly exciting topic, and I know you're going to want to hear every bit of it. I'm Natalie Shirley. I'm the Vice Chair of the Convention and Visitors Bureau for the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber. We are so pleased that you've joined us here today to learn more about how opportunity zones throughout Oklahoma City will encourage new levels of investment and redevelopment for our community. Today's event would not be possible without the generous support of our signature sponsor, Cox Business. Please help me welcome Anthony Robinson, Senior Account Executive.
Thank you, Natalie, and good afternoon, everybody. Cox is honored to be the signature sponsor for today's Chamber Forum. This topic is especially interest as helping the community and the continual business growth of Oklahoma City is an important piece to Cox as a company. Whether that is giving back through volunteering, donating money through our organization, Cox Charities, or expanding our network to areas of need, promoting community growth is essential to our organization. We appreciate your time. Please enjoy your lunch and the keen insight and observations from our expert panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm also pleased to recognize our corporate sponsor, ADG PC. Thank you all. Roy Williams will join us after lunch to moderate the panel. Today we're going to discuss these investment opportunities, how you can take advantage of them, and how we hope that they'll impact our neighborhoods and areas throughout Oklahoma City. But first, please enjoy your lunch. Roy Williams will be back shortly to introduce our panelists.
So if I could get everyone's attention, we're going to get started. We have a whole lot to cover, so we want to make sure we get it all in, and also to have some time for your questions, because we believe today's topic is going to create some questions. I want to officially thank Natalie for coming up here and pinch hitting for me. I was supposed to be doing what she was doing, but I was over at the History Center talking about giving a presentation on criminal justice. So I'm trying to transition from criminal justice to opportunity zones, and hopefully none of that overlaps. As some of you may know, in 2017, there were updates to the tax code through the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Acts that created some new benefits for investors called opportunity zones, which are economically distressed areas where new investments under certain conditions, which we're going to talk about, may be eligible for preferential tax treatment. Essentially, investors can defer tax on any prior gains invested in a qualified opportunity fund until the date on which the investment is sold or exchanged, or December 31, 2026, whichever comes first. In Oklahoma City, 8 areas have qualified as opportunity zones, offering incredible potential for development in some of our city's key geographical areas. Those areas include the Central Business District, the Innovation District, the Northeast 23rd Street Corridor, the I-35 Corridor, the I-35 and I-240 intersection, the I-40 Corridor, the I-44 and I-235 intersection, and the Adventure District. Each opportunity zone has a very distinct competitive position, which will naturally drive investments to certain kinds of projects. So today we're going to discuss these investment opportunities, how you can take advantage of them, and how we hope they will impact neighborhoods and areas throughout Oklahoma City. So we're very fortunate to hear from a number of people today on our panel who can help us all better understand Oklahoma City's opportunity zones and the potential impact. Their bios are in your program, so please help me welcome, as I introduce them and they come up here, Cheryl Denney, who's a shareholder, practice, and industry group leader at McAfee Taft. Scott Meacham, who's the president and CEO of I2E. Cathy O'Connor, the President and CEO of the Alliance for Economic Development of Oklahoma City. And lastly, Sarah Roberts, Program Officer for Inasmuch Foundation. Thank all of you for being here, and we are now going to begin the transition to the panel discussion. You can have it. You should have taken it before this meeting. So we're going to start with Cheryl. Will you start us out with an overview, really, of the incentive, how it works, specifically some of the issues, timing that makes it an urgent topic for investors right now?
Sure.
Should be.
Hello? What?
I don't think you control loud.
I'm on. Hello? Whoosh, there it goes. Hello? There we go. All right, sorry about that. I was going to say thank you for giving the really interesting topic to the lawyer of the group, one of the two lawyers of the group, to talk about the legal intricacies of opportunity zones. And I have a few slides, which I'm sure surprises everyone. I'm going to run through and give a very, very quick overview of opportunity zones, and then we're going to dive into some of the details and the specific areas of interest that have been identified. I'm going to have to turn around a little bit because I can't really see. So, as was said earlier, it was part of the tax reform package that came at the end of 2017. It wasn't really talked about a lot going into tax reform. It was kind of a late Christmas present when that it was included in the tax reform. It was championed by Senator Scott and Sean Parker, who is a Napster and Facebook. If you've ever seen the Facebook movie, Sean Parker is the guy that Justin Timberlake played in the Facebook movie. One very key point that was a little bit confusing for people at first, we have an Oklahoma State program that has the same name, Opportunity Zones. This is entirely different, so don't be confused by that. And I think the state is looking at maybe changing the name of their program to avoid some confusion. So, like I said, it was designed to spur investments in low-income communities. Most people who start to hear about this program, particularly real estate investors, comment that it's very similar to a 1031 exchange in that you can use it to defer capital gains. And we'll go into that a little bit. It requires a three-tier structure that we'll go into in a little bit, but that three-tier structure, if you've ever used other tax programs like new market tax credit or historic or low-income housing tax credits, they also use a three-tier structure. So structurally, it can complement and be used in conjunction with those other programs. As you can kind of tell by that, it can also be used for a variety of investment. So it's not just for housing, it's not just for business, it's not just for real estate. It can be used across the gamut, which is very unusual. So obviously, as you can tell by the turnout today, a very big topic of interest in the community. If you Google it, it's more than 384 million searches right now. That was actually as of last December, and I forgot to update it this morning. So 384 million searches as of last December and climbing every day, I'm sure. Opportunity zones. The first thing that we did back last January when we learned about this program was the governors had the ability to designate opportunity zones. They had to be low-income communities within a certain statutory designation, meet some criteria. So we went through that process. The state went through that process. The Oklahoma Opportunity Zones were ratified by Treasury Department summer of last year, and they're set. So the statute as it currently exists does not allow for any changes to those designations. There's already been some discussion in the industry about allowing changes to be made, particularly after the new census tract information comes out in 2020. But as of today, these census tracts are set for the duration of the program. So we talked about a 3-tier structure earlier. So this is essentially the 3-tier structure. So you have at the top a taxpayer, and in the middle you have what's called an opportunity zone fund, and at the bottom you have opportunity zone property. And we'll go through very quickly what each of those mean. But the 3-tier structure is the way that you have to go through the investment and think about the investment in order to get the benefit of the incentive. So the first thing is the investment has to be made by a taxpayer that has a capital gain from another event. So if you think about a taxpayer who has, Microsoft stock that they want to sell, who has another building that they want to sell, and they engage in that transaction that generates a capital gain, and they can elect to defer that capital gain, but only if they take that capital gain and within 180 days invest it in an opportunity zone fund, which is the second tier of the capital structure that we talked about. One interesting thing at the taxpayer level, if you're familiar with 1031s, you know about qualified intermediaries, and you have to designate that cash, so those actual dollars that you get from the original sale that then are the same dollars that you use to make the second investment. Direct tracing is not required for the Opportunity Zone program, which makes it a little bit easier to use. So that's something that's nice. So within 180 days, you have this other event. Within 180 days, you take it and you put it into the fund. The fund can be self-certified, which was kind of a surprise when that came out. And the fund, basically, it's an entity that has 90% of its assets invested in Opportunity Zone property. Opportunity Zone property is essentially two things. It can be equity in another business that is itself a qualified Opportunity Zone business, or it can be real property, essentially, that's located in a qualified Opportunity Zone. And the other, trying to see where we are here. So Opportunity Zone property, equity in a business that then has 70% of its assets located in an Opportunity Zone. And, the other thing to be aware of is to be qualified Opportunity Zone property, which is that last definition there, you have to look at, they wanted people to bring new capital into the Opportunity Zone. So it's not just enough to buy an office building that's in an Opportunity Zone. You have to come in and be willing to substantially improve that property or build a new business in an Opportunity Zone. So that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize, but you have to bring new capital into the Opportunity Zone in order to qualify for the incentive. So the last couple of slides, why is everybody so excited? I wanted to give a couple of examples. So there's basically 3 benefits from doing an Opportunity Zone deal. One is that capital gain that you generated when you sold your Microsoft stock. You get to defer capital gain taxes on that for you get to defer capital gains on that till the end of 2026. Sorry, I'm trying to read this behind me. So you've sold your Microsoft stock. You invested in an Opportunity Zone fund within 180 days. You get to defer the capital gain on that till the end of 2026 or earlier if you sell your investment in the Opportunity Zone fund. So that's the first big benefit, is you get the deferral of capital gain. If you hold the investment in your Opportunity Zone fund for 5 or 7 years, then you get an adjustment in basis. So when you do when that 2026 date does come around and you have to pay that tax, then you pay less tax than you would have otherwise paid. And then the final benefit, which is the one that's considered to be the most beneficial, is that investment that you have in the Opportunity Zone fund. If you hold it for 10 years and then you sell it, then whatever capital gain is generated by that transaction is not taxable so long as that transaction comes before the end of 2047. So those are the 3 big benefits. In very quick overview, there's an example that comes from the Economic Innovation Group, which you can read here about just putting some dollars to cents about how much benefit that might bring to the table. And they tried to take 2 identical investments, one in traditional stock market and one outside, and compare them. And according to their calculations, which I'm a lawyer, I don't do numbers, but they said going through an opportunity zone investment that you'd have an additional $44 by doing an investment this way as opposed to a traditional stock market investment. So a lot of dates there. The ones that are very important is the 180 days from the date that you triggered the capital gain. The other big date is that go back up. Sorry, the taxes that come at the end of 2026. So that date doesn't change. So again, the big initial thing is the big initial benefit is the deferral of capital gain till the end of 2026. So every day that goes by, that benefit becomes less and less valuable because you're getting closer and closer to that 2026 date. So.
Great.
That was very
clear
quick.
on that?
Follow, clear as mud.
No worry, you're going to have a chance for a question.
Yep.
First, though.
Did you have anything?
Kathy.
Kathy does.
We talked about where these opportunity zones were. Would you talk a little bit more about how they were identified and where specifically in Oklahoma City they are located?
Sure. Well, we did receive some guidance from the State Department of Commerce about the number of census tracts we could include and where, how they wanted us to focus. But basically, we were focused on Oklahoma County, identifying the low-income communities where we thought it was most likely to see investment within that 10-year time horizon that's mentioned in the federal law. So we convened a group, the Alliance convened a group of people from the city planning department, some developers, Cheryl was in the group, some experts about how the program would work, and we sat about trying to identify the census tracts that we thought were most likely to create the most benefit for Oklahoma City. And this is a map of those. This kind of an overview of where the group of census tracts are. There's 19 census tracts that are in Oklahoma City that we've kind of grouped into 8 areas to make it a little bit easier to understand. This is just a look at the ones that are in downtown Oklahoma City. Several of them, the Central Business District, the north part of what we call Core to Shore, adjacent to the convention center, the new convention center and the park are part of that. The Innovation District, the piece that includes the American Indian Cultural Center, and then running down I-35 south of the Cultural Center.
Thanks.
Go to the next question.
Scott, this is really more than just a simple real estate play. Talk about what other opportunities exist for really growing companies in here.
I think, if you go back to the policy, what Congress was trying to do was to unlock capital gains and get them deployed in areas that they viewed needed economic development. Well, an easy and probably the simplest application right now is in real estate. There's actually regulations out for real estate. They actually made them kind of investor friendly. The other side, though, and really where the big bang could potentially be, is in equity investments. So, my job is I'm a fund manager that invests in startups. So we're investing, typically trying to put things in to get a 10x return or above, right? Well, if you think about that, that's 1x of return on capital, assuming no deductions, basis adjustments, things like that tax people worry about. But it's 9x of capital gains. So something like this is tremendously powerful if you say, okay, I've got $1 million capital gain, I'm going to flip it in something, and potentially I'm going to get everything I make on that if I hold it for 10 years, it's going to be completely tax-free. Okay? That is powerful. Now there's the but, okay? The but is, and that's why we want to see the regs, the but is you've got to fit totally within the statute. That means you got to have a capital gain that you put in a fund within 6 months. The fund's got to deploy the money within 6 months. Arguably, the investment has to be held for 10 years. That's why we're hoping we get something in the regs that might loosen that up. Because why? Well, when I invest in a company and they're ready to go sell to Google or Apple or something, they don't want to tell Google or Apple, sorry, you got to wait for 10 years. Okay? So that makes it really difficult. I personally, being the cynic I am, think that the Treasury has figured out the cost of that. And what we were hearing was sort of this disconnect that Congress and congressional staff really wanted it to be as wide open and easy as possible. But Treasury, we were hearing internally, that they were concerned about ratcheting that down because guess how much tax revenue they're giving up if you're giving up that 9X, right? So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. They were very kind in their regs to real estate, to give real estate investment the flexibilities it needed. What I need is I need the ability to be able to, if Apple comes and buys one of my companies, give me another 6 months to reinvest it, right? If I can have that, then it becomes a really powerful tool for equity investment. If you're a business owner, you have to think about that too, right? Because this deal only works if there is a capital gain after 10 years. Again, that's easier to do in real estate because you can flip your project after 10 years. People tend to fall in love a little more with their businesses. And so to tell them, hey, I got to sell my business in 10 years to create a capital gain is a little bit tougher deal. The companies we're dealing with, that's what their whole game is. Their whole deal is to flip it as fast as they can. So it doesn't probably appeal very much to somebody that wants to build a business and have it for their kids and their grandkids, an intergenerational deal. But for a serial entrepreneur, somebody that's doing kind of a build and flip, if we get the flexibility, it will work really well. Now there is only one model I've seen that actually in the equity side that works right now, and it's right here in Oklahoma City. And I saw James Roller and the Next Stream team come in somewhere. Oh, yeah. They put you right next to the window, James. That's good. So what they're doing, and their model is different. So we're a traditional venture capital model, and we're investing in growing companies. Well, what they're doing is they're taking a discrete number of technologies that are spinning out of Baker Hughes. They're creating a company around that they will own, and then they'll drive it to market. So they've created a fund. Their fund is an Opportunity Zone fund. And their investors' expectation is that you will build these companies, you'll run them for 10 years, and then you'll flip them. Well, they can do that with that kind of model. So if you're an accredited investor and you have a really big capital gain, James is all the way over by the window. You can go talk to him or one of the other members of his team in the future. But so I see that kind of deal working. So if you created a fund to say, maybe more of a private equity model, where you're creating a fund to go buy a business and then flip the business, I think that works. It just doesn't, unless we get the help from the IRS we need in our regs, it's not as good a tool in our space where we work. We're watching it really closely. We have been, Steve Prescott from OMRF and I've been watching it because we think it's a great drug development tool because those tend to be longer term, but we still need to make sure. We got some other problems on drug development because they want them to have some active income. So we're trying to look at the regs and see if we can put together deals. I could get together a group of deals that are sort of ready to put money in 6 months. It's just being able to have them qualify and continue to manage them.
Great, thanks, Scott. Sarah, Opportunity Zones have attracted attention from the philanthropic community. Can you tell us more why foundations like yours are interested in Opportunity Zones and what the potential impact for investing is?
Sure. The purpose of Inasmuch Foundation and other philanthropies is essentially to help low-income populations or at-risk families in some ways lift themselves out of poverty. And so the reason you see me sort of hanging on to all these three very smart people is, I think there really is a role for philanthropy to come alongside these investments and really support those investments in whatever way makes sense. One of the things that we've talked about is potentially workforce development and other supportive services to essentially enhance opportunity for high-paying jobs and a career path for some of the folks who live in these opportunity zones. So we're very excited at Inasmuch Foundation, and I think Cathy more broadly is excited about convening philanthropy throughout Oklahoma City to support these investments as they materialize. Thank
you, Sarah. Cathy, speaking of you, Oklahoma City participated with the Accelerator for America to prepare a perspective for investors that would create a model for other communities. Can you tell us what that includes and how people can access that information?
Sure. Well, Oklahoma City was one of 3 cities that was selected by Accelerator for America. And the Accelerator for America is a nonprofit out of LA that was founded by Sean Parker to help look at different problems in urban areas. So they've been really excited about the Opportunity Zone. We're the authors of the legislation. And they picked Oklahoma City, Louisville, and South Bend, Indiana to prepare these sample investment prospectuses that other communities could use as a model to build their own investment prospectus. So Oklahoma City and Louisville were the first 2 to get theirs completed. Ours is available on the Alliance website. It's also available on the Chamber website. But this image is of a new website that we're going to launch shortly to allow investors and projects to be submitted to a portal so that we can try to match projects to investors and investors to projects. So this is an effort that actually is funded by Inasmuch to help us try to increase the interest and the velocity of investments in Oklahoma City. Some of the things that are included in our investment prospectus is obviously an overview of Oklahoma City. It's to try to get outside capital really excited about coming to Oklahoma City and making an investment. Now, we love all of our local investors and we want them to make investments too, but one of the things for these low-income communities is really trying to get outside capital to come in. So our investment prospectus includes a lot of information about Oklahoma City, why this is such a great place, the many accolades and awards that we've received, and then we go through each of the different Opportunity Zone areas and tell a little bit about that area. It's employment, it's average household income, and then we try to identify some catalytic projects for each area. And we'll go through some of those in just a minute when I answer another question. But we've tried to identify some catalytic investment opportunities so that we can begin to get people excited about investing in Oklahoma City.
Thanks, Cathy. Sarah, Cathy alluded to you in the role of the foundation. Would you say a little bit more about what y'all are doing to helping see the opportunities of Opportunity Zones?
Absolutely, absolutely. No, we've been pleased to support the website, and I think just overall, strategically, we really are excited about the idea of inclusive economic development. And those of you, I'm sure many of you were at the State of the City, I think we have a new mayor in Mayor Holt, who currently is really promoting inclusive economic development. And so I think the foundation and other philanthropic partners that we bring to the table are just really excited to see this economic development be more inclusive than it ever has been historically.
Thank you. Cheryl, without violating attorney-client privilege, could you characterize some of the types of projects you guys are working on with your clients right now that are directly these kinds?
Excuse me, absolutely. And I think just going on what Scott was talking about a little bit, really the first movers in this area are definitely the real estate developers. And I think that's probably because conceptually it fits really nicely. To talk about owning a piece of real property for 10 years doesn't really scare most real estate developers. That's kind of their horizon. Scott was talking about some regulations, just to give a little bit of background. Regulations were issued in October. They were proposed regulations. And at that time, IRS and Treasury highlighted some areas where they wanted input from the community and from the industry. And one of those areas was the redeployment issue that Scott raised for VC investments. They said at the time in October that they were going to issue more regulations by the end of the year. They also said they were going to have a public hearing in early January about the regulations. We didn't get anything by the end of the year, and government shutdown has delayed the public hearing. So right now, there's a lot of uncertainty in the industry. Now, that being said, we do have some clients who are moving forward predominantly in the real estate area, and predominantly, I would say, on deals that they were kind of working on beforehand, where they find themselves in an opportunity zone and are structuring the deals to take advantage of this incentive, either kind of internally where maybe the developer themselves has capital gain that they can shelter or defer, or looking to bring in investors who want to take advantage of the opportunity zone incentive. One kind of question in the industry now is if you have an opportunity zone fund with outside money come into a project, what benefit does that bring to the project? In other words, does it adjust what IRR the investors are looking for? How does the benefit of the opportunity zone flow through to the project? And at least what we're hearing from opportunity zone funds outside of Oklahoma right now is when they come in and look at a project, they say, no, the benefit is for the investors. And the benefit that the project gets is you just got moved to the top of our pile. So that's something that we're hoping might change a little bit as the industry matures and develops. But right now, a lot of investors are saying, no, you got moved to the top of the pile, which is a benefit, you know, because the pile can be really big in certain places and you get lost. But hopefully we're going to, as things go on, see that more of that benefit flows down to the project.
Great, terrific. Scott, you articulated how significant this incentive is specifically, but talk about how this can be layered with other incentives and programs to make what we might think of as a higher risk project more feasible or more profitable.
Yeah, and again, I think there's a sort of whether it's real estate or equity makes a difference. We have a lot of incentives for real estate out there, new markets, historic building, all kinds of different things that you can stack. And the economics, by the way, are really start getting interesting when you start thinking about an opportunity zone. I mean, it's not just the 10 years on the real estate side. Just think about this, you got a project, you've been running for 10 years, you've depreciated it down, and the tax law says, oh, you get to write it up to the value you sell it for? So basically, all of those benefits now, all the depreciation benefits, any other new markets, other tax credits that you may get, all of those are going to the bottom line of the project. So for a real estate project, think about a project that was maybe, to your point, marginally economically viable. Now it needs to sell for something, right? It needs to sell for, you want it to at least break even. But let's say it's just a break-even project, and you can get some of these other benefits. You can make projects that were not economically feasible before suddenly become feasible. To me, that is the real power in on the sort of social side of this, is the ability to do some of those kinds of things in these traditionally sort of blighted areas. You know, maybe it's a housing project where housing deals didn't really work as well before, or something like that. There's a lot of power to that. The same would apply on the equity side, but the economics are very different, and the ability to get sort of the equity-based incentives are not the same. I mean, obviously, if you're creating jobs, you could fold in quality jobs and things like that, but the economics are not as powerful, I believe, as on the real estate side. As I said before, the economics on the equity side are going to be, you've got to generate a big capital gain at the end of the day. Whereas on the real estate side, it's you got to be able to get your money back, basically. So anyway, that's how I see sort of the power of how all this can work. Now, there has been some discussion about states coming in and potentially doing a piggyback credit. And I think there's maybe one state, Ohio, that's done that. I think that's interesting, and I can tell you, I don't think I didn't sign a CD confidentiality agreement or anything. I know there's been some discussion at the state level here about doing that. I just don't know with all the other stuff if that'll have traction. And there's sort of this theory in some circles of state incentives that if you don't give people credits for things they're already going to do. And so you probably have to get over that hurdle.
Thanks, Scott. So the words opportunity zone implies that there must be an opportunity. So let's talk about that just for a second before we take your questions. Each of the zones in Oklahoma City offers real different potentials for meeting some goals of improving lower income neighborhoods and providing return on invested funds. So Cathy, can you run through the designated areas that we saw up there earlier and what you see as some of the development or business opportunities that we think could occur in each of these?
Sure. So one of the first areas is, as I mentioned, the Central Business District that includes the area around the new MAPS 3 Park, Scissortail Park, the convention center, and all of the central business district. So obviously, there's an opportunity for a lot of investment in we hope, housing and mixed-use development in the area. We've developed a focus over the last several years in affordable housing, so we think that this is an important tool to promote affordable housing. And just to kind of echo what some of the other panelists have said is the real, maybe the best returns are created by layering this with other programs that we already have in place. So the city has tax increment financing districts. We have what we call the Strategic Investment Fund, which is a job creation fund that could help with creating jobs in these areas. We have a new affordable housing bond program that's funded locally. It's not one of the state programs, but you could also layer on low-income housing tax credits, historic tax credits, all of those different programs in these areas to make these projects really work. So this, one of the areas that's included is the Boathouse District. This is a diagram of some property that is mostly publicly owned in downtown Oklahoma City, and we've put this together as kind of a way to look at where you could make large-scale development investments in downtown Oklahoma City. If we had a new headquarters company, when I work with Roy and his staff on projects and people are looking for locations, we like to know where all of our inventory is. So this is just a diagram that kind of shows how much property could be fit downtown on, a lot of this property is already owned by the city and some of it's privately owned. The American Indian Cultural Center, again, this is one of the areas that was included as an opportunity zone. One of the plans for the American Indian Cultural Center is to make pretty significant commercial investments that help support the operation of the museum. So retail, hospitality, those kinds of investments would all qualify. This is the area that's the innovation district. Again, this is a slide out of our investment prospectus, so it talks about the top 3 industries. Some of the areas of investment would include partnering possibly with universities. One of the big topics of conversation around the country right now is how can this tool be used to help universities grow their research campuses. So those are ongoing discussions that we're having here in Oklahoma City as well. GE Baker Hughes is a big investor in this area, so the companies that they're interested in rolling out, again, that's another possibility for investment. And then as we continue to grow the innovation district, one of the things we really want to do there is to build more residential, more mixed-use development, restaurants, retail, things for people to do there instead of just working or going to the hospital. The 23rd Street corridor. So we've included the area from I-35 along 23rd Street, I-235, west towards 235 as a part of the district. Urban Renewal and the Alliance have been very active in this area, trying to encourage private investment. Some of the investments that have already taken place is the new Centennial Health location, some retail restaurant development along 23rd. We'd like to encourage and see some of that continue in that area. This is another area that's included. This is the I-35 corridor. So most of you are pretty familiar with this as an industrial area. Again, this could be an area where investment could lead to job creation. And so some of the assets along the way are identified on this chart. It starts out with the American Indian Cultural Center on the north, and then again includes some of those industrial uses as you go to the south. I-35 and I-240 census tract is included, and I think we all probably know what's in this census tract. There's a mall there called Crossroads Mall. We definitely see that as an opportunity for investment, and this might be something that could really work well for the opportunity zone in a lot of different ways, both property the property investment and creating companies. There's a zone that's included on west along I-40, just north of I-40, north of where the outlet mall is. So this is another kind of industrial area that has been included. This is a look at some of the assets along that area. The outlet shops, OKC Works, Will Rogers Airport is in very close proximity. So again, these are pages out of our investment prospectus to help people from outside Oklahoma City get familiar with our community and know what kind of assets are already here that can help support future investments. This is the area at I-44 and I-235, again, another area in northeast Oklahoma City along the highways where investment definitely would be a possibility. Chesapeake Energy, nearby the Capitol, an industrial corridor that could really benefit from some additional investment. The Adventure District is another area that we've included. While there's a lot of publicly owned land and public attractions in the area, there's also an opportunity for private investment in the area. So this again is another location that was included. This is just a look at some of those attractions and what helps make this an attractive area for private investment. And so that's really kind of a quick run through of all of them. Again, you can go to the Alliance website and we have the entire investment prospectus there. And obviously any of us are glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Cathy. And with that, it is time for your questions. I know we've given you a lot of technical detail, some high-level detail, but we have staff, so if you'll raise your hand, they'll bring a mic and you can direct it to whoever on the panel you wish to direct it to. And our first one, I think, is over there.
Hi, thank you for putting on this forum. It's awesome. I think Cheryl, you kind of hit on talking about the additional capital requirement. Could you elaborate more on that? I think the example you gave is an office building.
Sure. Just real quickly before I forget, for anyone who wants to dive deep into the details, I'm going to do a shameless commercial. We have a free webinar on our website, and it is actually free. But it is an hour and a half of everything. Oh, stop it.
There's nothing free.
Stop it. It is an hour and a half deep dive into the opportunity zones. And it'll be up on the website until we feel the information is stale, like when the new regulations come out. But in other words, talking about substantial improvement is what you're talking about. And to be qualified opportunity zone property, the property has to be acquired after the end of 2017. And then it either has to be new use in the opportunity zone. So you can think about a new building or a new piece of equipment that is brought into the opportunity zone, or a new business that is relocated into the opportunity zone. So that's kind of new use. Or a substantial improvement. And so this is where you buy an existing building and you improve the building. And the substantial improvement test that they use is similar to the substantial improvement test that's used for historic tax credits. So you essentially have to double your basis in the building by making improvements that add to your basis. So if you spent $1 million buying a new office building in an opportunity zone, you would need to then spend another $1 million improving the property to make that building qualified opportunity zone property. The regulations gave us some guidance on kind of how long you have to do that. It's essentially 30 months. There's a safe harbor where if you get the money that comes into the Opportunity Zone Fund and they have a written plan to use it to improve a building within 30 months, then the cash while it's held at the fund or in the Opportunity Zone business is considered kind of good property. But that's essentially what you're looking at, is a doubling of the basis. And the other thing is they came out with the revenue ruling at the same time as they issued the regulations that said you can separate your basis in the ground from your basis in the building. So if you spend $1 million to buy a new building in an opportunity zone, you could have an appraisal done to segregate that and say $100,000 was the value of the ground and 900,000 was the value of the building, and then you would only need to spend another 900,000 to be substantially improved. So double your basis in the building, but not necessarily your basis in the ground.
Scott, that hour and a half is probably free. It's at 30 minutes or an hour after that.
Exactly.
15-minute increments.
Exactly.
15-minute increments.
When she says hello, it's free,
Yeah.
but after that,
So says the reformed lawyer.
We're not picking one. Back there in the corner.
Treasurer Meacham, you mentioned what you could learn from Treasury still yet, assuming we get past this government shutdown. What are some other things that other government agencies could be helpful, whether it's in the philanthropic and helping faith-based ministries or other organizations or the investors in the room? Let's say SBA, let's maybe say USDA. What are some other opportunities through the federal government that you see could partner with the conversation here?
yeah, I think that's an interesting opportunity that if somebody would sort of take the lead in the federal government, which is, by the way, that's a big, they can't even obviously keep open right now, but if somebody would take the lead, there's a tremendous power, I think, if you could bring like Commerce and some of these other agencies together to work around this incentive. There's a lot of power to it. I'm not sure that federal government is that coordinated and that good right now. But hopefully, as time goes on, and we actually get all the regs out and get all the sort of infrastructure in place, because really, from a lawyer's standpoint, what makes a lawyer a little nervous is when you don't have all your legal infrastructure, because then you're doing this thing called taking risk, right? And so lawyers are not comfortable with their clients taking risk and like to point that out. But I think once you get that infrastructure in place, I think there is an opportunity for agencies to come together. I think one of the things you're seeing in Oklahoma City, which I think is really good, is really Oklahoma City's kind of on the forefront of this, of saying we see an opportunity here, and what we're going to do for our broader community is we're going to create a platform that we put deals on. So if you come up with a deal, you have a way to find money. Because to me, the biggest challenge in this whole deal was the pairing of money and deals. The federal government could help on that, but fortunately here in Oklahoma City, we have the city government and the chamber that are kind of taking the forefront on that.
We've got time for a couple more questions.
And I would say, just to follow on that real quickly, the president a month or so ago did kind of put together a steering committee for opportunity zones that's trying to bring together different arms of the federal government to figure out how to all work together. It's one of those things, we'll see if they actually do anything or not, but it is out there.
And Cheryl, I might piggyback on that too. There are aspects of the federal government that have done some interesting place-based work. Early Head Start and Head Start, which is a program to educate 0 to 5-year-old children from low-income families, has been restricted to certain zip codes, or enhanced in certain zip codes would probably be a better way of putting it, throughout Oklahoma and throughout the nation. And Cathy and I have even tossed around, eventually, if we did some real important place-based investment, like the gentleman's question suggested, would there be a way even to maybe bring some national philanthropy to Oklahoma, just generated by the interest around that zip code and the demographics that made up that zip code? And so again, probably too soon to tell, but I think your question is really spot on.
Hi, my name's Matt Campbell. I'm a tax partner at Hall Estill, like Cheryl. First, I want to commend the city. I have been doing planning on this nationwide, and I think Oklahoma City's got their act together in a way that many other cities throughout the country do not. So thank you for taking the initiative to do what you're doing and for hosting this tremendous panel. To echo on what Scott had said, I do think there does need to be a lot of certainty that's added to the final regulations, and of course this government shutdown doesn't help. But for single asset real estate deals, I just wanted to echo that I think there is enough certainty to move forward on those deals. And I was at a conference late this last year, and they commented that everyone sees these opportunity zone projects as the big shiny pool, and everyone wants to stick their foot in the water, but they're a little nervous to jump into that. I am getting calls, around the country already. People have, $1 million of capital gain that they'd like to park. They want to, find people that are knowledgeable in the space. And every day that goes by, you might have someone that's rolling off where they had money to invest, but they might not otherwise. And I have no doubt there's a ton of developers that are in this room. And I really see those folks as being in the catbird seat with this. We've got this situation. I appreciate the opportunity to indulge me in this, where we're trying to marry up the money with the developers and those that have the capital gains. And I think the developers, to the extent that you can identify projects that can be developed and sharpen the pencil so that you can show legitimate return on investment, just absent the opportunity zone benefits, those deals will sell and you'll find money for those deals. And I'm seeing more of that for those that have property within zones. They've got a related party rule they have to deal with, where they might look to kind of talk with the developer and try and market those deals and sell them and take up to 20%. So I just want to say those things from a high level perspective, that I think there's a huge amount of opportunity, and there's incentive, frankly, to get invested by the end of this year, because we only have 7 years between now and 2026. So if you want that 15% reduction on your capital gain, it has to be invested by the end of this year. So that's a little bit of a driver. Plenty of opportunity still, if it doesn't happen this year, to get the 10% reduction. But to finally get to a question, Cheryl, I wondered, what have you been hearing about the step up in basis issue? And there's probably some people in the room that aren't aware of this, but there's a concern that, and Scott touched on this, that if there's a fund that has multiple assets they sell, the statute right now requires that the fund interest needs to be sold, and so that would mean basically selling your interest in everything that's underneath. Do you hold out hope that some of these large funds that are setting up, that they might get some relief, that they could perhaps sell asset 1 through 10 after year 10 and get a step up in basis? Or what are you hearing on that? And you may be just in the dark as what I am. It's, to me, that's the biggest frustration with working with the really large players that have
Right.
hundreds of millions of dollars to deploy.
Right. Well, I think when we're dealing with the federal government, we're always in the dark to a certain extent. I hold out hope. I think the people who put together this program were VC guys, and I was at a conference where they were speaking, and they were insistent that this program was built for VC. And in order to be built for VC, you need to have the ability to redeploy and recycle capital. And it's the same thing for the huge funds with the multiple investments and the ability to recycle capital. Within the regulations that came out in October, as I'm sure you know, on a somewhat similar issue, Treasury took the concept of you could do a FIFO deal, so first in, first out. So I think I can see a way where they could say you can segregate your investments, and if you're selling out part of it, that it's the first in, first out method. So I think they'll come up with a way to do it. In other areas like new markets tax credits, they do have a redeployment rule where if you're able to redeploy your capital into another low-income community within a year, then it's kind of no harm, no foul. So I think we'll get there. Scott's the skeptic up here. I guess I'm the optimist.
Skeptic, you have a comment?
Skeptic?
I'll own that. I just think, at a certain level, it gets to be, cost starts mattering. And this is a phenomenally, it was never even scored when it went through the legislative process. They don't even know how much this is going to cost yet. My guess is some people are starting to do some cost projections, and that will impact some of these decisions.
Good, thank you. We want to make sure we stay on time. We're about at that time. Help me give the panelists a round of applause. Hopefully this has helped motivate some of you to really look seriously at this and potentially start looking at deals. We're excited to continue this series of chamber forums that we've been doing now all the way through October on the third Wednesday of the month right here in this room. Next month, we're going to have the Oklahoma City Public School District here and telling us about their Pathway to Greatness project that really ensures every student a more equitable educational experience. You can learn about that more on the Chamber Forum website at okcchamber.com/pathway. I'd like to again thank our signature sponsor, Cox Business, and the corporate sponsor, ADGPC, for their participation in today's event. Thank all of you for being here, for your engagement and your questions. We are adjourned. Thank you.